Beaming out across the galaxy, this is where conspiracy on the wild side meets the perspective of a lifetime. This is the Free Zone with your host, Freeman.
Hello and welcome to the Free Zone. Well, many of you are at the Free Your Mind conference right now. I am actually taking the stage at this moment, but I wanted to prepare this show for you, for those of you that couldn't make it to Philadelphia this weekend. But if you are still interested and you're anywhere near the area, definitely go to freeyourmindconference.com and get over there now, because tomorrow afternoon, actually, you will get to hear our very special guest that will be speaking with you tonight. But I wanted to bring this show to you just in case you're not making it out there to Free Your Mind. So get over to freeyourmindconference.com and check out all the great talks that will be going on, and wish me luck as I'm taking the stage at this very moment. So I want to thank you all so much for all your support and all the effort that's been going on. Members, if you have any troubles, anything, write me at freeman@freemantv.com and let me know so that I can get anything and everything going for you. Thank you all so much for your support. Now, division is the word of the day. If we see anything on our social strata right now, it is that we are divided in every way, shape, or form. Now, how much of this division is due to the lack of understanding of where we come from? I mean, how old is the human species? Do we go back hundreds of thousands of years? Do we go back millions of years? Do Judeo-Christian concepts disrupt the scientific understanding of humanity's origins? What is de-evolution? And we are going to now get deep into the research of human origins and challenge the theories of Darwin's evolution with none other than Michael Cremo, who is the world-renowned co-author of Forbidden Archaeology. Michael Cremo is a member of the World Archaeological Congress and the European Association of Archaeologists, as well as an associate member of the Bhaktivedanta Institute, specializing in history, philosophy, the philosophy of science. And I am just overjoyed to share with you the works of Michael Cremo. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Good to be with you and all your listeners on the Free Zone.
Thank you so much. Well, it is quite a question there. How far back does humanity go? Now, you titled your book Forbidden Archaeology, and I really feel like this kind of stands as another tour de force that we could equate with our current understanding of the alternative media trying to get their attention out there, along with the mainstream media feeding everybody these lines of division. I think that division that we are dealing with right now stems from the lack of understanding of human origins. So I want to talk with you a little bit why this archaeology is forbidden and who's standing in the way as we begin this talk.
Good question. You know, if you look in the current textbooks of archaeology that students study in high school or university, you'll find the idea that humans like us first came into existence less than 200,000 years ago. And before that, we're told there were no human beings like us. There were only more primitive ape-like human ancestors, ape men of various kinds. And before that, primitive apes and monkeys. But I was kind of wondering about that. I grew up in a family that was a military family. My father was an intelligence officer in the United States Air Force. So that meant a couple things for me as I was growing up. One thing it meant is I was traveling a lot around the world, and I got exposed to a lot of different worldviews and cultures. And among them was the spiritual worldview of ancient India, which has a completely different concept of human origins and antiquity. The ancient Sanskrit writings of India have accounts of a human presence going back many millions of years on Earth. So it's something that you find in many of the ancient wisdom traditions, the idea that the human species has a very long history on this planet. So that's one thing that influenced me. And I began to think, is there any evidence for that? Now, as I said, you're not going to see such evidence in the current textbooks. But another thing I got from my early life as the son of an Air Force intelligence officer is that I I could understand there are things in the world that most people don't know about that are going on. That you have to have a top secret security clearance to learn about, that there are facts that are hidden from the mainstream public. So I thought, could that also be the case with archaeological evidence? So I decided, let me look beyond the textbooks. Let me dig into the original reports published by archaeologists, geologists, paleontologists, other scientists who are digging into the earth and looking for various kinds of evidence of the history of life on this planet. When I started doing that, when I started digging into the original reports, not what's just published in today's textbooks, I began to find many reports of discoveries of human bones, human artifacts, human footprints, many millions of years old in some cases, going much further back in time than the 200,000 years or so that most scientists today believe is the limit for the time of our human species on this planet. So I had to ask myself a question: why, if this evidence is there in the original scientific reports, why isn't it in the textbooks today? Why is it forbidden archaeology? If you look at archaeology as a big museum, you would find that the public is let into only one small room of that museum, and there they're going to see on display the artifacts and bones that support, the dominant Darwinian evolutionary explanation of human origins, which has humans like us coming into existence less than 200,000 years ago. But there are, in fact, other rooms in that big museum of archaeology, rooms with locks on the doors. So what I've tried to do in my work is take the locks off the doors, let people see what's really there in that big museum of archaeology, not just the facts that are presented in today's textbooks, but all of the discoveries, and let them make up their minds about what the real truth is. So you were asking what the reason for there being a forbidden archaeology is. I think it has something to do with what I call knowledge filtration. There's a process of knowledge filtration that operates in the world of science. It operates in other fields as well. politics, economics, but it also operates in the world of science, whereby, if you have a dominant theory in the world of science, what you'll find is that reports of evidence that conform to the dominant theory pass through the knowledge filter very easily, whereas evidence that radically contradicts the dominant theory tends to be suppressed, forgotten, set aside, dismissed, or otherwise filtered out, by this knowledge filtration process.
Yeah, I can see that clearly. They want to keep this dominant theme so that the power structure stays in place and never let these two things cross. The first thing that popped in my mind, though, as you were talking about this, was the idea of humans running around with dinosaurs. Did you have anything to discuss on that?
Well, it's an interesting topic. The dinosaurs went extinct, according to the mainstream scientific ideas, about 65 million years ago at the end of the Cretaceous period. It's a geological period in the history of life on Earth. So they believe the dinosaurs went extinct about 65 million years ago. They believe they came into existence a couple hundred million years before that. So between about 250 million years ago and 65 million years ago, it would be the age of the dinosaurs. So as far as I'm concerned, there's evidence that humans were existing before the time of the dinosaurs, during the time of the dinosaurs, and after the time of the dinosaurs. As far as evidence during the time of the dinosaurs is concerned, there have been discoveries of human footprints during the time of the dinosaurs. There was an example of some human footprints that were found in the same formations as dinosaur footprints at the Paluxy River site in Texas. This evidence was originally reported by a scientist, a Dr. Bird, and it came to the attention of creationist scientists, and Dr. Henry Morris reported them, but then he became doubtful about them and decided that what he thought were human footprints were really just dinosaur footprints that had been subjected to erosion that had modified the prints so that they looked like human footprints rather than dinosaur footprints. So he withdrew his claims about them. And, therefore, I didn't include that case in my book, Forbidden Archaeology. But later, it was interesting, and this happens from time to time. I get letters or emails from archaeology students. And there was an archaeology student at a university in Texas who wrote to me. She had gotten a copy of my book, Forbidden Archaeology, and was interested in doing research to kind of help out. So she asked me if there's anything I could do. And I told her, well, you're in Texas. You could go to this Paluxy River site and have a look at those footprints there, which are alleged to be human footprints alongside dinosaur footprints. And she did go there, and she sent me some information about new excavations that were being carried out there. They were stripping away layers of rock, and then they would come to the layers that have the footprints in them. And there were some newly uncovered human footprints, and she gave me her opinion that to her, they looked like human footprints. So on that basis, although I had been initially skeptical about these reports, I'm giving them a higher level of credibility now as evidence for a human presence at the time of the dinosaurs. And then, as far as evidence of humans existing before the time of the dinosaurs is concerned, in the year 1862, a scientific journal called The Geologist published an interesting report. An anatomically modern human skeleton was found 90 feet below the surface of the ground in Macoupin County in the state of Illinois, sort of close to St. Louis. It's in the southern part of the state of Illinois, down near Missouri. So it was a very interesting report. One of the key facts that was reported was that directly above the skeleton was a thick layer of slate rock that was unbroken. And this is a key point, because one way that some scientists try to explain away discoveries like this is they say, well, probably the skeleton came from some higher, more recent level. Maybe somebody dug a grave. I mean, of course, it's very hard to conceive of somebody digging through 90 feet of different kinds of soil and clay and rock, to dig a grave. But that possibility is ruled out by the solid layer of slate rock that was found directly above the layer containing the skeleton. And the layer containing the skeleton belongs to the Carboniferous period, which is about 300 million years old. That's from before the time of the dinosaurs. So you've got cases like that which show a human presence before the time of the dinosaurs, during the time of the dinosaurs, and after the time of the dinosaurs.
So are we looking at cyclical catastrophes here that stunt humanity and then we regrow in ignorance of our past?
I think that's true. The ancient Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, they had an idea like that. They had at that time, they had a cyclical concept of time. And they said, in the course of cyclical time, human civilizations have risen and fallen many different times. And This is something that's also present in the ancient Sanskrit writings of India, which also have a cyclical concept of time. There are vast cycles of time that are separated by catastrophic events that wipe out life or much of the life on this planet. And after these catastrophic events that wipe out life on this planet, life, including human life, has to be restored. The earth has to be repopulated. And it's kind of interesting, if we look at, say, this concept of cyclical time that's found in the ancient Sanskrit writings of India, the basic unit of that cyclical time is called the kalpa, or the day of Brahma, and it lasts about 4,320,000,000 years. And then that is followed by what's called a night of Brahma, which lasts for 4,320,000,000 years. And then there's another day, another night, another day, another night. And during the days of Brahma, life, including human life, is manifest in the universe. And during the nights, it's dormant, like in a sleeping state, you could say. So the kalpa, or the day of Brahma, is divided into 14 sub-periods called manvantars. And each manvantar lasts about 306 million years. According to the ancient Indian cosmological calendar, we're now in the 7th manvantar of the current creation cycle, the current kalpa, or day of Brahma. So if we're about halfway through it, that means it began about 2 billion years ago. And as I said, it's that kalpa, that period of 4,320,000,000 years, is divided into 14 manvantar periods. And at the end of each manvantar, there's a devastation that wipes out life on Earth, a catastrophe. And if we're in the 7th manvantar, that means there have been 6 of these catastrophic events that have occurred in the history of life on Earth over the past 2 billion years. This is the information that's presented in the ancient Sanskrit writings of India. Now, it's very interesting that according to modern science, according to modern paleontology, the history of life on Earth goes back a couple of billion years, kind of like to the beginning of the Kalpa, or the beginning of the day of Brahma. And since that time, over those couple of billion years, according to modern science, according to modern paleontology and geology, there have been what they call 6 major extinction events that have wiped out a great deal of the life on Earth that existed at those times. And these 6 major extinction events are spaced at intervals of several 100 million years, just like the Manvantar cycles that are described in the ancient Sanskrit writings of India. So according to modern science, the most recent extinction event was the one that occurred about 65 million years ago at the end of the Cretaceous period and wiped out the dinosaurs. So whether we're looking at knowledge that comes to us through the ancient wisdom traditions, whether we're talking about the Greek philosophers or the thinkers of ancient India, there's a cyclical concept of time with periodic catastrophes. I know in December of 2012, a lot of people were concerned with the Mayan calendar from Central America, from the Mayan civilization of the Yucatan and Honduras and countries like that down there in Central America. They had a cyclical concept of time with a calendar involving vast cycles of time. And many researchers had thought that one of those cycles was coming to an end in December 2012. So I remember I was on a cruise. I was a speaker on a cruise ship that was going down to the Mayan sites in the Yucatan in December 2012. At the time, many people thought there might be a huge catastrophe at that time, and there was even a movie, a big Hollywood movie that showed that. So a lot of people were concerned. When I was on the cruise, and I was a speaker at it, we went to Chichen Itza, which is one of the Mayan sites in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. I said there's a big devastation coming, but according to the ancient Sanskrit writings of India, it will be at the end of the current Manvantar period, which is about 180 million years from now. So that big devastation, that huge catastrophe is coming, but not anytime soon. I remember also around that time, a little bit earlier in the year, I was in India giving lectures at universities there. And some students at one of the universities asked me during the question session, what about, this 2012, this catastrophe? Is it going to happen? I said, it's going to happen, but not anytime real soon. It's going to happen in about 180 million years from now. So I told him, you can register for your next semester classes. You don't got to worry about it.
Right. Well, yeah, we get lost in our understanding of humanity through this very knowledge filtration, and it has divided the planet into so many different spheres. And I'm thinking about the how this story comes about. We're told about Lucy or the Java Man or the ape-like people that existed that then evolved into humans. But you have found evidence to show that there were even carvings of anatomically correct humans as we know them now in the 21st century. How do we get from this idea that humans came from these ape-like beings, is the origins of humanity as an ape man, where does that come from?
Well, that comes from the ideas of Charles Darwin. And basically, if you actually look at all of the evidence, if you look at all the discoveries of human bones, human artifacts, human footprints, you'll see they go back many, many millions of years if you look at all of them. Now, I don't deny the existence of ape men. I think ape men existed in the past. They may still be existing now. I mean, that takes you into another whole topic, evidence for the existence of living ape men. That takes you into the topic of Bigfoot and Yeti and Sasquatch.
I was leading towards that, actually, the Almas of Central Asia, and yeah, I was hoping you would get into that as well.
All of that. There's that whole category of evidence, and then there's evidence of ancient apes and monkeys. So I would say, if you really look at all the evidence, the pattern that you see is one of coexistence rather than evolution of one from the other. Just as today, human beings coexist with apes and monkeys, and quite possibly, I believe, with different kinds of ape men. In the past, we also coexisted with them. So, but there was another point I want to mention. You were mentioning the phenomenon of division into competing groups. I think that also comes from the work of Mr. Darwin. And it kind of works like this. I mean, some people, ask me, Michael, what difference does it make if human beings have been present on this earth for 200,000 years or 5,000 years or millions of years or billions of years? I mean, what difference does it make if humans have been around, as your evidence shows, for millions and millions of years? And the difference that it makes is that we need new explanations for human origins. If what I'm saying is true, we need new explanations for human origins. Now, in my book, Forbidden Archaeology, I didn't present any new explanation of human origins. I just presented the evidence, the archaeological evidence that contradicts what we're being told today. And it was sort of a deliberate decision not to include an alternative explanation in that book, because I wanted people to be free to think about it for themselves, and I put my alternative explanation in another book, Human Devolution, a Vedic alternative to Darwin's theory. And what I propose there is that before we even really start talking about where did human beings come from, we should first of all discuss what is a human being. And today, most scientists, under the influence of the Darwinian evolutionary ideas, say that a human being is a machine made of molecules, and that's all there is to it. Richard Dawkins, a prominent English evolutionary scientist, put it very nicely. He said in one of his books, "We are survival machines. We are robot vehicles blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes." In other words, what are we? According to the Darwinian evolutionary picture, we are machines made of molecules in competition with each other, individually and collectively. We're in competition with each other for survival. And that's what we really are. And as far as consciousness is concerned, well, that's just a temporary byproduct of chemicals interacting in the brain. And at the time of death, when the chemicals in the brain become disorganized, they would say there's no more consciousness, nothing like that. So it's a pretty dark picture of what we are. Machines made of matter, machines made of molecules in competition with each other for survival. But I think that is a false picture of who we are. If we accept that false identity of being simply machines made of matter in competition with each other for survival, then yes, then we do divide ourselves into so many competing groups, based on superficial differences of race and gender and politics and religion and all of that. We do divide ourselves into competing, conflicting groups, and we destroy our environment, and we throw ourselves into intense levels of conflict on all levels of human society. And that's the kind of world we live in. But if we had another conception of who we are based on consciousness, things would be a little bit different. And that's what I propose in my book, Human Devolution, that really we are conscious selves, and consciousness exists independently from matter. Consciousness is not produced by matter. It has its own independent existence. It has no beginning, no end. As conscious beings, I propose, we originally existed on some higher level of reality. I call it the level of pure consciousness. And on that level, we exist in harmony with all other beings of pure consciousness and the source of all these beings of pure consciousness. But if we become selfish, if we desire to dominate, control, and exploit other beings of pure consciousness, we can no longer live on that higher level of reality. And there must be some alternative reality for us to exist in. And that is this world, this universe of matter that we find ourselves in now. I mean, this idea that it's kind of an alternative or virtual reality system was explored some years ago in a series of films about the Matrix, as it was called. And I believe that's a pretty accurate description of where we find ourselves now, where matter has covered our original consciousness. We find ourselves now in contact with matter, and covered by matter, we divide ourselves into so many conflicting groups. But if we had a different conception of who we were, if we understand I'm a being of pure consciousness, you're a being of pure consciousness, everyone is a being of pure consciousness, there'd be no need to divide ourselves up into so many conflicting groups. And we would find a way to satisfy our material needs in the most simple, natural, fair, and efficient way possible. And we would put most of our human energy into developing the resource of consciousness in a kind of collective way. So I think the position of the scientific community now in the worldwide structure of things is to keep people indoctrinated in the idea that they are machines made of molecules in competition with each other for survival. Because when people think like that, they think that to produce and consume more and more material things is the main purpose of human life. And they organize themselves into societies that are based on that. Competing, competitive societies based on trying to gain the maximum amount of control and exploitation and domination of the resources of matter. And there have been huge political, financial, economic, cultural, and scientific institutions constructed on that basis. And it all depends ultimately on people remaining fixed in the idea that, well, we're just machines made of molecules in competition with each other for survival. As long as people think like that, their goals and values will be very materialistic. They'll function in the way that the leaders of these financial, political, and economic institutions want them to. They'll be generating huge amounts of wealth that flow into different pockets in a very unequal way. So to keep that whole system intact, they have to keep people indoctrinated in the idea that they're machines made of molecules in competition with each other for survival, that they're purely material beings that have come into existence through a purely material, accidental process. That's what the Darwinian theory of evolution does. It provides the basis for that materialistic sense of identity, which is critical for this whole setup of political, economic, cultural, and financial institutions.
You will find that that is right in tune with the beliefs of the Church of Satan. I can't help but think about that as you discuss this. And this is, folks, how important the understanding of human origins is. I mean, it's at the heart of the division that we see just erupting, and at the corruption that we see of what we call elites taking over and dominating our planet through this very belief system. But when we look at humanity, when we go back, we find that humanity, Michael, is seeking perfection. Much of the evidence that you discover of ancient humans is the fact that we have developed straight lines, right angles, seeking this perfection in the nature of the world, creating spheres with the grooves. And these are some of the very initial evidence that you can find of human existence in the far, far distant past, is this seeking of perfection. Wouldn't you say that?
Yes, I think that tendency is there. I think people, they're in a contradictory position. On the one point, they're being taught to see themselves as machines made of molecules in competition with each other for survival. And the evidence is that these bodies made of molecules are temporary. They don't exist for very long. They come into existence at some point, and then after 100 years maximum, they're gone. And according to the current materialistic scientific understanding of consciousness, it's just a temporary byproduct of chemical interactions in the brain. They would say, well, at the time of death, when the chemicals in the brain become disorganized, then there's no more consciousness. That's it. It's all over, finished. But people just naturally, they psychologically, within their hearts, they feel that's not right. There's a contradiction between what they're told about themselves and how they actually feel, because they actually feel uncomfortable when confronted with the temporary nature of human life. It would be more perfect to have no beginning, no end. And that is the actual situation. If they could come to the understanding that I'm not this vehicle, of molecules. That's not my real self. My real self is my consciousness. That is who I really am. And that consciousness has no beginning, no end. If they understood that, then they would be making a step towards that feeling of perfection that we all strive for. And, I think that's very important. Of course, there's a lot of scientific evidence that supports the idea that consciousness has its own independent existence apart from matter, apart from the brain, apart from molecules. Consciousness has its own independent existence. But this evidence has been subjected to this knowledge filtering process. I mean, there is evidence, say, for example, from out of body or near death experiences that shows there is a conscious self that can exist apart from the brain, apart from the body. During heart attacks, for example, the heart stops beating, blood stops flowing to the brain. Medical instruments show that brain waves stop. At a moment like that, a person should be completely unconscious, yet many people in that condition report separating from their bodies, and they look down and they see what the doctors and nurses are doing to revive them. There was an American cardiologist, heart surgeon, Dr. Michael Sabin, who heard many of these reports from his patients, and he wondered, are they having a true experience, or are they just making up something? So he did a scientific study. He took a couple dozen of these heart attack patients who had reported these experiences, and he interviewed each one of them very carefully. He wanted to know exactly what did you see, exactly what did you see the doctors and nurses doing, what did you hear them saying. He carefully recorded all of this, and then he compared what they said to the medical records kept by the doctors and nurses who had treated them. And, for insurance purposes, they keep very exact records of the treatment that they give. And the treatment is not the same in each case. It's different. But what Dr. Sabin found was that the reports given by these people matched the information given in the medical records kept by the doctors and the nurses. And just to test against the idea that, well, maybe they just, from watching doctor movies or television shows, they knew a bunch of stuff, he took another group of 25, a couple dozen heart attack patients, and who had not reported these out-of-body experiences. And he asked them, just imagine, on the basis of whatever you know, whatever you've heard in the hospital, whatever television shows you've seen, whatever, just imagine for me, what do you think happened when you were unconscious, when you were under anesthesia? What do you think that the doctors and nurses were doing? And he found that they all made major mistakes, whereas the other group that had reported these out-of-body experiences, they didn't make any major mistakes at all. So he concluded on the basis of these studies that these heart attack patients were reporting real experiences, that their conscious self was separating from their brain, separating from their body, and actually observing what was going on. And that leads to another idea, namely that that conscious self could survive the death of the body and move to another body. That's the whole idea of reincarnation or transmigration of the conscious self from body to body.
Well, let
And
me
the,
let
go
me
ahead.
hold you right there. I want to announce to the folks that I am so excited that next week this will be the very topic as we talk with Dr. Joe Marshala on repeatlessness. And Dr. Joe has died a number of times. So we're going to have an amazing discussion on that very topic. He's been a fan of the Free Zone for a decade, but it's the first time me getting him on the show. And I'm so excited that you brought that up, Michael, because it really just will lead right in. And we're wrapping up this last hour, or this first hour, before we move on over into the members section, where I'm going to ask you some more of the stranger questions about elongated skulls and human cloning. But I wanted to begin the next hour with the idea of the Vedic teachings and the understandings. And folks, you're going to find out that me and Michael Cremo actually have something in common, and it relates to the Grateful Dead, if you believe that or not. We're gonna pick that up on the other side. So I want you all to know that Michael Cremo will be speaking at Free Your Mind tomorrow. That is Sunday the 9th at, I didn't have your time. I think you're speaking about 1:30 or 3. It's in the afternoon. And you don't want to miss this, folks. Get out to Free Your Mind. Get over to Philadelphia. Get to freeyourmindconference.com. But now, if you really want to get deep into the understanding that is necessary for us to get back to relationships of humanity, to understand these true hidden origins and the forbidden archaeology, get over to mcremo.com. That's mcremo.com, and look into the deep work that I'm telling you, this information has never been more scrutinized than when Dr. Cremo came to. I called you doctor. You're not.
I have an honorary PhD.
Okay.
I don't have a formal doctorate from earned in the regular way, but I've got an honorary one from a small college in Europe.
Well, believe that, folks, because Michael Cremo has spoken at more scientific and alternative institutions than you could count. And they are just left stunned, and you've even been banned and blocked from speaking at certain university or institutions. And this topic is dangerous to the world elite. Realize that this hidden, forbidden archaeology is put in place for a reason. And just as Michael Cremo has told us of his father's involvement in intelligence communities, the idea of keeping secrets secret is very powerful. So what do you have coming up, Michael, in our near future?
Well, you mentioned it, the Free Your Mind conference, and then a little bit later this summer in July, I'm scheduled to be a speaker at an event that's taking place at Mount Shasta in California. That's in the summertime. To learn about that, people can go to my website mcremo.com and go to the schedule link, and they'll see whatever upcoming speaking events and interviews that are on my schedule.
They're coming to get you, Michael.
Yes, they are. I have to depart right now.
Okay, folks, we're gonna have to end this right now. They're here. They're on to us. They've got us. Oh,
I live in Los Angeles, and that's a common sound.
I'm certain of that. It totally threw me off. I had a final thought there for you, and that siren just knocked it right out of my head. I'm trying to recall, but I think that thought is gone. It'll come up in the next hour. I'm sure of that. This was an amazing discussion, just, skimming the surface. If you folks have ever seen Forbidden Archaeology, well, you're going to be working on that book for years.
Some people call it forbidding archaeology.
There you go.
It's 900 pages long. It's really interesting. We actually brought out an abridged version of the book. It's called The Hidden History of the Human Race, which is 300 pages. But, we found that more people buy the bigger book than the shorter one. It seems that the people that are interested want it all. They don't want to miss anything. So,
absolutely, you need this scrutiny of evidence, folks. You need this deep insight into understanding that we are beyond just simple matter, atheistic view of these machines that just here to eat. We must move beyond that. And I'm so excited, Michael, that you brought up this entire consciousness idea, because that is exactly what we've been discussing. And it really, to me, seems to be our solution beyond trying to get into more division. So any final thoughts?
Absolutely right. And I think to really advance that, we're going to need some changes in the education system. Of course, people can get alternative sources of information, but to have, I think, widespread structural change across our whole worldwide human civilization, we're going to need some changes in the education system. I think the monopoly that governments have given to the supporters of the current Darwinian evolutionary theories is going to have to end.
Without a doubt. Well, thank you so much, folks, for tuning in. I hope you will think about subscribing to freemantv.com. I am working hard to bring you the best information out there in understanding all of this madness that we're dealing with. I hope to get your support so that I can do more and more. That's my only goal here, and bring you more great minds like Michael Cremo. So please get over and check out mcremo.com. And get over to freemantv.com, share and subscribe, and thank you all so much. And we will see you all next week.